16 to 1, a podcast about education, teaching, and learning.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi.
How are you?
Good. How are you?
Making it through the week?
Nope.
Okay.
Next question.
Okay, moving on. We want to just...
Neither is the dog.
Really?
I hope we don't get run out by a fart this episode.
I hope so, too.
Oh, man. If they didn't listen to that, what do you call them? Easter eggs?
Yeah, there's an Easter egg at the very, very end of the audio file of every episode, in case you haven't figured that out by now, but it's after our blurb thing, and that's...
It's something funny that got cut
Yes.
that probably has no context. But last episode's, I was laughing because I always just start the episode and go clear to the end because I don't know what you actually pick. Like when we're recording and like, oh, that might be it. Just because it's funny stuff that I know will get cut otherwise. I wasn't expecting that one.
Yeah, I decided to be a little naughtier than usual with my selection of the audio
It was
clip
great.
last time. We were recording and our dog let fly a very stinky toot, so we had to evacuate
Yeah.
for a moment.
It was
so that's
so
what
funny.
that's what the Easter egg was last
But
time.
you can tell that we're like not near our mics because it's just like kind of us yelling from
yeah,
the distance,
yeah.
which made it so much funnier.
Yep.
Because we immediately both like flew out of here and we're just screaming.
It was a bad one.
Anyways,
yeah.
that just go back and listen because it was really funny.
Yeah. Unless I've forgotten to put one in some episode, which it's likely that I probably did. There should be one in every episode.
Yeah.
But
I think you normally do because I may almost always make a point just to go listen to the end because like I said, I don't know what you pick because I'm not always around when you do all of the editing.
Yep.
It's hilarious.
So check it out. Wait for the Easter egg. Who knows what it'll be this week. Top of the show. We had a quick note. We just wanted to say hello to a very specific group of listeners. For some reason, there are a bunch of people listening from Nigeria. So if that is you,
Do we know any?
I don't think I do, but maybe I do. Maybe somebody I knew is there. I
Maybe
don't
somebody
know.
we know is just traveling.
Maybe, but there are a lot of downloads, and a lot of them are of one episode in
Okay.
particular. So it's there must be something going on. But if that's you and you're in Nigeria and you're listening to the podcast,
Hello, Nigeria.
yeah, hi Nigeria, and thanks for listening. And if that is you, if you are listening to the pod, why don't you write in and say hi, hello at
What are you
1621.com. We want to hear from you.
Who are you?
Yeah, just tell us about what's going
I
on.
have questions.
So anyway,
That's always true, though. They can always write in. We will send in. I'll figure out how to get stickers to Nigeria.
yeah, I would do that too.
Can I tell one funny story really quickly?
Of course you can.
One of our, I'm going to call her my best friend, one of my best friends at work. She is also friends with Chelsea, but I'm going to claim her for this story.
She's claiming my friend. She was my
Well,
friend first.
you
I'm just
like-
saying.
That's true. So she was listening to our Smithsonian
OG
episode.
friend? Yes.
Yeah, my friend. She's going to think this is hilarious too, but she texted me because she was driving and was listening to the episode about the Smithsonians, which was 2 episodes ago. And she said that she kept wanting to like cut us off because she had things to add, which she wanted me to mention that her favorite thing about the Smithsonians is that depending on which one you eat at, the food is also reflective of what the museum is. So she really likes the Native American one.
Oh,
She's
I did
talking
not
about
know
some
that.
purple potatoes that she loved.
Wow.
Okay.
Okay.
But the kicker is that she was voice texting me with her little boy in the car. It was like a kind of a longer message, like a paragraph text, kind of telling us just what she was thinking about the episode or whatever. And then all of a sudden at the end, it just said, "Oh, you saw a mixing truck. That's great." And there was nothing else. And so I read it and I was
Congratulations, you
like,
saw a mixing truck.
yeah, I was like, okay. And I was kind of like, where is she? Like, did I see a missing truck and not know? So I texted her but she was voice chatting us about the pod and her little boy was in the backseat yelling about the mixing truck, but her phone picked up on it. So I was getting a text about the podcast and also about trucks. It was just really funny.
Very cute. Very cute.
So anyways, that's kind of a fun.
We finally got our stickers.
Yeah, I finally got her stickers yesterday.
We've been going through with it. We've been following through on our commitment to sending out and disseminating all of the stickers.
It might take me a couple tries, but anyways, write in, especially if you're from Nigeria. We're very interested in what's happening.
Yeah.
So,
Cool. All right. Well, what are we talking about this week?
this episode, it's kind of a mashup. Well, we're talking about bullying in schools, but focusing on the role of social media
Yeah.
as part of the problem.
Yep. Technology and ubiquitous cell phones and all of the apps that make us feel bad about ourselves, even as adults, and what all of that means for
Yeah.
people in schools. Yeah.
Well, and this is especially timely because right now, like this funk, I'm going to call it a funk. I'm like coming out of my winter sad, my seasonal affective disorder. It's like
Your body is not compensating well for the shift in seasons.
no, and also I think I just have such bad allergies that every day I'm just like ugh,
Yeah.
you know. But I told Chelsea that every time that she has bad news to tell me, just about anything, the state of the world, something personal, that I don't want to hear it until she has something positive ready to go. So I need like a
It's a good principle
Yeah.
in general, though.
yeah, but I'm just like, I've kind of reached my limit. So now she's working on, like, she'll send me a text and it'll be like something kind of bad. And then I won't respond because I'm teaching or something. And then I'll look and then it'll be like a positive text following it up. Today, though, you put this into practice.
Yes.
This whole sending me something positive after
Yes.
something negative. Oh, not always negative, just like, you know. And so I got a text and we were talking about something, you know, bad. And then a few minutes later, I felt my watch buzz and it was you telling me that Ketanji Brown Jackson had been officially sworn in. I suppose
Confirmed.
confirmed. Oh yeah, sorry. Is she honorable now? What do we call her? Justice?
If you ask me, I'm going to get it wrong. I
Okay.
don't remember.
Well, I just want to give her credit because she's brilliant.
yeah. Uh-huh.
But anyways, that was your good news. So it was like the best news, and it made me like tear up a little bit.
Aw.
So, very exciting.
Oh.
I'm just excited. I'm excited to have a black woman. You know, I think that's great. So.
Yeah.
And she is brilliant, truly brilliant. So.
And she was very patient in her
In a way that I could not be.
Senate
So.
questioning.
Okay. Anyways, so
Okay.
bullying
Yes.
and social
Back to
media in
bullying.
schools.
Yeah, I've been kind of thinking about this a lot because you've been talking about just some random stuff that's been happening in your school, kind of related to bullying, I guess, but also just dealing with kids being very involved in social media. I think specifically Snapchat to me seems to be a very and things like Snapchat seems to be very dangerous for teenagers because the whole concept of sending something that can basically disappear is risky for teens.
It disappearing is one thing. The problem is that they think they disappear and they get screenshotted.
That's also a thing that
So
happens.
it's actually not the disappearing that we deal with so much.
Well,
That's
I
the
was
problem.
thinking more about from like a parent's perspective or a teacher's perspective of not being able to know what's actually going on because the conversation has disappeared, you know, after a certain amount of time.
but they get themselves in trouble on all the outlets. So
I'm sure.
we
Probably
deal with a lot of
doesn't
Instagram.
really matter what, and that's like you actually have an article later on that kind of talks about this. New things pop up and they always go after, you know, they being whoever is trying to, you know, whoever it was who first went after video games and then went after, you know, television. And it's like, oh, well, kids these days are watching too much. They're playing violent video games. They're watching. Anytime a new thing comes along, there's always a backlash of that sort. But I think that it doesn't really matter which bit of social media we're talking about, which company or which product or whatever, but it's still going to, you know, the landscape is still going to present a challenge.
Yeah, it sure is. Let me tell you.
Yeah. So why don't you set the stage a little bit?
Okay. So currently, no federal law directly addresses bullying. There are cases where bullying overlaps with discriminatory harassment, and that is covered under federal civil rights laws. And those are both enforced by the U.S. Department of Ed and the U.S. Department of Justice. So no matter what label is used, like bullying or hazing, especially in like colleges, you hear that one.
Yeah.
Teasing.
Cyberbullying.
Yeah. Schools are obligated by these laws to address the conduct, but they have to meet these three pieces of criteria, basically. So first is that it is unwelcome and objectively offensive. So that could be like derogatory language or a threat. 2, it creates a hostile environment at school. So it's serious enough that it interferes or limits a student's ability to participate in something. That would include class or even extracurriculars. Anything offered by a school is covered under that one. And then third is that it is based on a student's race, color, national origin, sex, disability, or religion. And that includes their sexual orientation, their gender identity, and their intersex traits. It also covers sex-based stereotypes and sexual harassment.
Interesting. So it has to meet all three criteria for federal law to begin to care about it as bullying. Is that?
Yeah, and just for it to be certainly enforced as far as a discriminatory. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So there's really not much guidance from the feds here, except in the case of discriminatory harassment.
Exactly.
Got it.
The DOJ, the Department of Justice, does have jurisdiction to enforce Title IV of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, which confirms equal protection based on religion in public schools. Another one is Title VI of that same act, and it does not explicitly identify religion as a basis for prohibited discrimination, but these sorts of harassments do get kind of covered, if that makes sense. So it would have to be enough of a religious charge thing for it to fall under, you know what I mean, being discriminatory based on religion, essentially. So that's sort of separate.
I mean, in a way, I think this makes sense. Now, this is not to say that there aren't guidelines on how to deal with this stuff published by like the Department of Education and all that stuff, because you know there's tons of research out there, and the government does do things to try to spread around that research.
Right. This is
to
just
schools.
these are the only things that are covered like at a federal level,
Right.
to address bullying.
The rest is reserved to the states.
So the Ohio Department of Education does have a policy guidance for student action planning, and it's called the HIB. It's the Anti-Harassment, Intimidation, and Bullying Policy. So after an incident has occurred in the school, an issue following that would fall under this policy, it does have to be investigated by the principal or whoever within the school handles those types of things. In my case, it's usually our assistant principal.
Yeah, you were just talking about this. We were talking about this the other day because there was some sort of case of bullying at one of the schools around here.
Yeah.
And I was just thinking how much I would not like to be the person in the school district or like
Who
the
does
school
that?
or the building or whatever it is who's in charge of being the
It's hard work.
disciplinarian. I would not want to have anything to do with that. So, yeah.
So the state requires us, right, to have someone who is designated to do this work. Based on the report, whoever's in charge, I'm going to say like the administration, because that's normally someone that would do that. They create a student action plan, and that's a safeguard for all students to basically prevent anything in the future. So that can include like harassment, intimidation, bullying, teen dating violence, cyberbullying, stuff on the school bus, even as far as like human trafficking, if it's been reported. What they have to do then is create an action plan for each student involved. So that means the one that was harmed, the one that caused harm, and bystanders. If their influence or their involvement was considered vital enough to what happened.
The bystanders?
Yes.
Gotcha.
So obviously the most important is the person who was harmed, but also to address the person who caused the harm, obviously.
Right.
And then also bystanders are part of the plan as well. This is a plan that's created between the student, their parent or guardian, the school staff, and then any peers that might have been involved. The state's goal is to create a plan that's broad enough to fit a ton of different cases, right? Like types of bullying or harassment. So that's kind of where it's hard to read it and know like exactly what they mean. And I think it's just because they've pushed this out to all the schools to then create their own plans based off of these
Again,
goals,
it's more like
if that makes sense.
guidelines than like a form that, you know.
And it's just sort of to hold them accountable. So obviously, like if you're dealing with the student who was harmed, you want to hear their concerns, you want to identify their needs, you want to determine other risks.
Yeah.
Usually when these types of things happen, the person who has hurt someone is going through something. You know what I mean? Like there are a lot of levels to it. So the first goal, though, is obviously taking care of the person who was harmed in whatever way.
Of course.
Making sure that they feel safe, making sure that they're secure. And then also, sometimes in a school, that looks like removing them from classes together or limiting when one of them can be in the hallway if it's like a common area.
Depending on the severity of it, sure. There are a couple of reasons why these sorts of things happen. Obviously, the main one is that you're just trying to prevent further incidences of bullying from occurring and address the issue and give out discipline. But also, I think it's like there's a liability element going on. You don't want to be just left standing there with your pants down with regard to the bullying situation in your school. So, yeah, this is all sort of interesting because I think unless you have kids in a school district, unless you're actively involved to the point where your child either is bullying other kids or has been severely bullied by other kids, you wouldn't necessarily come into contact with all of these measures that exist to try to prevent bullying from happening. So I think a lot of times it's really easy, especially for parents, to whinge and complain about lack of discipline and stuff like this. But I think a lot of that is a lack of familiarity with all of the things that do exist to try to.
Because they don't realize how much is actually
There's
going on.
so many processes. There's so much paperwork. I know every time you have to be involved with a disciplinary incident, it's like paperwork
Today.
for you. You just have to fill out
Yeah.
paperwork. So like everything is documented. We've talked about some of that stuff before,
Yeah.
disciplinary issues, but
It's a lot of work to get a kid in trouble.
Yeah.
Or to deal with a student who has, you and I mean, done enough that it would require me to find outside support for something. You know, like it's not an everyday thing by any means. But the other thing that this plan requires from the state is that the administration creates an action plan with the one who caused the harm. So listening to their perspective, understanding and identifying their needs, like a risk factor or
getting
other...
through all those Maslow's needs.
Exactly. And
Which
so,
episode was that? We covered Maslow's hierarchy.
But also providing discipline that's reasonable. And you want to make sure that you monitor that plan and check for progress and things like that.
Yeah, follow through is very important on some of this stuff. You can't just like dole out the punishment and call it a day and think that everything is going to get better.
Yeah. And I think, like I was kind of already saying, so many times when we deal with kids who have made poor choices and treated other students wrongly, right? Bullying, whatever it might have looked like, it's usually coming from a place of their own problems. It's actually not always that they have something specifically wrong with that person.
Right.
And so a lot of times when we get into this conversation, we realize that it's actually not at all about the person that they hurt in some cases.
It's not actually the specifics of who was involved with the bullying incident.
There are absolutely cases where it was. But I probably see more often than not that it's a result of something else that's occurring.
Yep. That makes sense.
So I'm going to talk about what my school does sort of just generally, helping support students and prevent bullying and just trying to build a better school culture. So we have a committee called PBIS.
There's a committee for everything in public schools, by the way. There's always a committee.
We love committees. We heard Risha talk about committees on episode 50.
Yes, we did.
So
she was in a lot of committees.
She was. Me too. I feel that. So I am on our PBIS committee, and PBIS stands for Positive Behavioral Interventions and Supports.
Okay.
And what PBIS is an evidence-based 3-tiered framework to improve and integrate all of the data, systems, and practices affecting student outcomes every day.
That's a mouthful.
That's from their website.
Yeah.
I'm wearing a t-shirt now.
That's from...
So the first tier that PBIS works to achieve is to establish a foundation of regular, proactive support while preventing unwanted behaviors.
That sounds good. What does that look like in practice?
It means like not writing on the walls in the bathroom.
I see.
This is a bad time to ask me that question.
Is that happening a lot in your school?
That's all we're
right
dealing
now?
with, yeah.
Yikes. Don't do graffiti, kids. Don't do it.
Yeah, well, they're not listening to this.
Okay.
Tier 2 is full of practices and system support for students who are at risk for developing more serious problem behaviors before those behaviors start.
Prevention. Got
So
it.
these are students that we get the input of our staff to say, this is a kid I think we should focus on. Teachers have a sense. If you don't know a teacher,
Spidey sense.
yeah, we really do. I feel like we've got a good read on kids to be like, this one needs, something. We might not know like what it is, but we can tell. So that's kind of what tier 2, I'm sure that they would probably hate that I summarized it as a Spidey sense, but tier 2 would basically say a goal is to identify
Kid is
these
on my
students.
Spidey sense radar.
Yeah, to identify these students before it becomes
A really big
something.
problem.
Yes. Tier 3 is about giving students a chance to receive more intensive and individualized support to improve their behavior. And so these 3 are really hard to separate for me, and it is very Maslow's. Like, you can't achieve 3 without 1 and 2.
Sure.
But I will say, I've been on this committee now for a couple of years, and it's my favorite committee. It is full of other teachers that I respect and love to work with, and that we all want to build a place that the students are safe and happy in. So it's really fun to work on this committee because not like the rest of my staff isn't. Obviously, I'm not trying to be that way, but it's a very rewarding thing to work on. A couple of the things that we do, we create lists of students who deserve recognition who might not always receive it. So these are kids that might not get all A's or might not get all A's and B's and might not have perfect attendance, but still deserve to be recognized even for small things. What I have learned as a teacher and as a student who was very motivated by the rewards of these things was that you getting all A's and all A's and B's and having perfect attendance was what you did to get an award, right?
Right.
But that's coming from a place of privilege. That's coming from a place of I had family support and I was raised to
My parents
value.
bothered to get me on the school bus every morning.
Right.
Yeah.
The argument about perfect attendance really bothers me too because it's such an ableist thing. Like there are students who have illnesses.
Yeah.
That perfect attendance is not possible.
I'm honestly surprised that we haven't done away with perfect attendance awards by this point because it creates so many unrealistic expectations
It does.
too.
And because we shouldn't expect, even in our work as adults, we shouldn't expect to not feel well and still be you know what I mean? Like I think we're just setting ourselves up for this. And I think you and I can say we know what it feels like to feel like you can't take
feel
time
pressured,
off, to
like
feel
you still have to go into
I
work.
don't feel well, you know.
That's actually one change with COVID that I've actually appreciated.
Me
now
too.
I work from home, so I
Yeah.
don't really have. But if back when I had an office job,
You would
I
understand.
often felt very pressured to go in when I was sick, just because it's not. It wasn't even like a specific
No.
thing that somebody
Like,
did
there
or
wasn't
said. It
someone
was
who
just
was-
pressure, and I could be feeling awful and show up at work, and I'm like, you know what? I can actually work from home, and I would be way more productive doing so
because I could
be on my couch with my headache
taking care of myself.
Right,
Yeah.
but I will still get work done if
Yeah.
you need me to get work done. But like that's another thing though is that sometimes you have to be able to take a sick day without working.
Yes.
Like with the second time when COVID hit, there was a week where I just did not work because I didn't have the energy to sit at my desk. And like I wanted to be working, I wanted to be productive, but it just so anyway. Long story short, I think employers are going to have to kind of adjust attitudes and policies about that and make things more explicit and make it clear that like, hey, if you are sick, please don't come in to work. And I think that a lot of our issues with that on a societal level start very early because we start giving out attendance awards to kids in elementary school. And it's just like, okay, well, what if you had a family emergency? What if a relative died? What if and like kids should never
if you're
be
just
punished?
sick?
Yeah.
What if you are a child who is sick?
People
It
just
doesn't
shouldn't
matter.
be punished for simply being ill.
Now,
you
I
know?
understand on the school side why we have to deal with attendance as a concern just for, educational purposes. But the work of PBIS is to help kind of take that stigma and allow, like in this case, what I'm talking about, we try to give recognition to kids who don't have perfect attendance, who don't have all A's and all B's.
I think that's great.
And it's a focus. Something else we've done is we've created a list of areas that are concerns for the school just to help address places where bullying and other just bad activities occur. So like lunches and hallways and bathrooms, things like that. We've selected a group of student leaders to provide input, and I think they'll probably end up meeting maybe quarterly, maybe like per 9 weeks, kind of giving them a chance just to come in and talk and tell us what they're feeling and what they think and how it's going. And that's been interesting.
Yeah.
Another thing, I don't think our committee is perfect. I don't think the work of PBIS is perfect, but we've been able to provide and help support like vape detectors for the bathrooms in the high school. And I know that sounds really weird, but they also detect like loud noises, like a gunshot, or they can fights, things like that. And they are connected to an app, which our administrators have then on their phones, on their computers, and they can use that to help identify where they're vaping, where they're, fighting at the moment, or God forbid, there is an active shooter.
In case you're not familiar with this, there's just basically an epidemic of underage smoking, in this case with vapes, like you're saying, in schools. It's happening a whole lot. Kids are getting their hands on this stuff, and some of them are THC vapes too, which is another problem for everyone. And not all teachers know what they look like, so it's hard to discipline because it's hard to catch because they're like small and discreet. And anyway, this is just in case you weren't familiar with what's going on with that. There are vapes everywhere in high schools right now. So.
And this is obviously a safety goal as far as installing these detectors for multiple reasons. But we have had so many problems with vapes, I'd say like the past couple years, that it has made students who aren't going to the bathroom to vape not want to go to the bathroom at the most common and most easy times to go to the bathroom. So in between class or whatever. Because they don't want to be in there while these things are happening. And so instead then they're missing more class to go to the bathroom when it's not prime time. because they don't want to be caught in
the
you know what I
dragnet.
mean?
Yeah.
And that seems so weird to go about it that way, but that's really the conversations that I've had with students. They're like, I don't want to be in there when they're on there doing that.
Yeah.
And so then they have to leave a classroom to go to the bathroom. So they're missing class to go to the bathroom because they don't feel safe and secure to go to the bathroom when is like a reasonable time.
So this is an example of a disciplinary issue that ends up impacting academics because
they're missing class.
Yeah, because of what you're just saying.
So these detectors, though, make it so that once it goes off and alerts, then the administration can report to the restroom if that's, reasonable. Or they can just go check the cameras and look at the timestamp and see who was coming and going, kind of narrow it down from there. But some of these, what was happening is there might be 4 or 5 girls in the bathroom, waiting on stalls or whatever. Well, they all get called in because they were on there when it goes off.
Yeah.
So these are students who aren't vaping who get called in to be like, who was vaping? And kids don't like giving up other kids.
Yeah, I'll bet not.
And so
that can lead directly to all kinds of bullying.
And it's
for
a
example.
weird social stress. So this has been something that, we've worked to do. So, a lot of that, what I just went through, wasn't related directly to bullying, but it's part of the work that we do with PBIS, which is a means to help make a safer place. And so the hope is that if this committee,
healthier environment all around.
Yeah, so like that's our goal, right? If we make it a safer, more constructive place, then hopefully, just naturally,
there will be less bullying.
Exactly, like that's kind of the end goal.
Makes
so
sense.
it's weird. It's weird to think of it. It's kind of a non-direct route.
I think it's the best route. I think we do a little too much treating of the symptoms rather than the root causes of bullying sometimes. And treating of the symptoms looks like just punishing kids and doling out whatever.
Because that's
suspensions
what you most commonly,
Sure, but none of that really is work that actually addresses a lot of the factors that make for bullying in the first place, like what you're talking about, these environmental things, family things, other stressors that kids have in their lives, social stresses, academic stresses, all of that needs to be addressed just as much, if not more than just the disciplinary actions involved when it comes to bullying incidents. Okay, well, you want to loop back and kind of focus on social media specifically and the role that it plays in some of this stuff?
Yeah, I mean, as always, we have a lot to include in the show notes this episode, but my research basically kept circling back to the fact that there's a very good chance that a lot of what we're dealing with is simply students getting phones when they're too young to learn about how to act appropriately with them.
Yeah.
So I'm going to quickly step on a soapbox.
Yes.
And it goes like this.
Yes.
This requires teachers to do a lot of what I would consider parenting, which can be frustrating, but I'm also speaking from a place of privilege because I had parents to parent me. If our students do not have someone at home who is loving them and investing in them, then they're not going to learn. And that's the unfortunate part of it.
Sure.
So
makes sense.
Do I think it's wrong that teachers have to teach these things? No, but I just hope that some of it,
happens. Well, I mean, you and I were talking about this in planning for this episode, and we have a little different perspective on this because, first of all, we're kind of digital natives, so we have a 98% digital natives.
I'd do like 95, but I'll accept 98.
Well, we might have been a little bit different on this too because
you definitely
I grew
were.
up with.
I was not.
Yeah,
I did not get internet in the house until like 7th or 8th
So that's
grade.
actually a big difference, and the reason I did is because my dad had a software company, so he was like, for work, always around computers, we always had the internet. It was just like,
we had a Macintosh.
Yeah. Some of those
a 95.
The pretty plastic one with the colors?
No. Well, those were in school.
Gotcha.
The one at home, not that.
Okay. One of the gray ones.
It was a big gray one.
Big gray CRT.
But I would agree with that because you and I were raised very differently with technology.
We were. So that makes one bit of difference. The other thing I was just going to say is that social media as such was not when we were in school. It was just becoming a thing. I remember Zanga. Yeah, there was Zanga. There were blog platforms like that.
There were like Yahoo,
MySpace.
There were Yahoo web pages. Yeah.
So those were the early days, and I remember using Twitter in high school because I very specifically remember sending in tweets over SMS. Like you would text to a phone number the content of your tweet, and it would post to your timeline.
You used to do that with Facebook posts as well.
And the reason
you could do it with photos.
Yeah. Well, the reason we did that, at least the reason I did that, is because I didn't have a smartphone until a certain point. I can't remember when I got my first actual smartphone. It was in high school, but
You had a smartphone in high school?
Yeah.
You know how old I was when I got my first smartphone?
You were in college, right?
I was 20. My 20th birthday.
20.
I got an iPhone.
Yeah. No wonder you like iPhones so much. They go way back.
I've only ever had one smartphone. Multiples of that phone. You know what I mean?
Yes, I do know what you mean.
But I would totally agree with you.
No,
we
so,
are
yeah.
in two very different places.
Well,
Can I
just
just
gonna-
say one thing,
Yes.
though? What I was talking about my frustrations of teachers feeling like they have to sometimes parent like proper use of a cell phone. I don't think there's anything wrong with that because I think it's important for kids to see and to be modeled, right? Like how we should be using our phones. But I do want to take up for the kids who do the right thing because for every one that doesn't act appropriately on their phones, there are two that do. So I don't want it to be like all the teenagers aren't. It's not like that.
It's
So I just want to be
that
clear.
some people can reasonably use their technology without abusing it. Yeah.
Yeah, and I trust most of my teenagers to do the right thing with their phones. That's what I would say.
I think that was the attitude growing up that my parents had with me, but I was going to mention.
Yeah, sorry, get back to what you
No.
were.
It's just, I don't recall, maybe they did and I just don't remember, but I don't recall a specific conversation where they were like, this is a smartphone. There are dangers on the internet. Because, I mean,
No.
because again, I grew up with it and they
Yeah.
knew I grew up with it. So by the time I got a smartphone and by the time
You were
social
already
media started
danger.
happening, yeah, I was pretty well aware. But again, that kind of is that digital native thing that I'm talking about where like
Yeah.
I grew up connecting to the internet with the screamy wee woo sound, the dial up connection sound. I just grew up on the internet. So it was a thing that was just always around. And I knew that you were not supposed to, share personal details with strangers and like very basic things like that. But also, I don't think anyone ever had a conversation with me about social media specifically because growing up it was not a thing.
Yeah.
Then it became a thing kind of later in my high school years, started to become a thing like Facebook and Twitter started growing in popularity at that time. But nobody really knew about all of the dangers of those platforms that have now become so apparent that they glare at you every time you think about them. So we didn't have tech giants dictating, the course of our lives like we do now at that time. So while I think that perhaps somebody should have had some sort of conversation with us at that point, I'm not sure when it would have happened in our lives.
My parents were definitely like, don't do this on social media. Don't do, It
Yeah.
was like that, but it was as they were learning it as well.
Yep.
So I think that's part of the difference.
But it is kind of curious to me now, though, is that we've got parents who are closer to our age
They are
trying to figure
our
out.
age.
Yeah, parents who, well, I'm just saying not like our parents' generation, but like our generation has kids. And I don't know that we are equipped because it's just been our default for so long to exist in these social media ecosystems. I don't know that we are equipped to have good, constructive conversations with the next generation about how to
don't?
use and not abuse. I just don't know because
I think so.
Well, I also think that social media itself is not doing a good job of addressing a lot of the issues that it's almost designed to exploit them rather than.
That's not really their goal.
So the problem is that any conversation like that is just kind of fighting against the tide because all these companies are just screaming for eyeballs and attention. It's an attention economy and they don't care about the problems that their platforms create because they just care about the ad revenue at the end of the day. Like that's really the problem. So anyway, it's just all to say that I'm not sure that we have, as a society, have figured out how best to have these kinds of conversations with anyone yet, because these technologies are still, in the grand scheme of things, very new. And the rate of communication has just so recently increased, again, in the grand scheme of history, that we have not thought through all the implications of being able to instantly tweet out your opinion to millions of people. We just haven't dealt with that reality as a world. So anyway, that's my soapbox.
Yeah, have at it.
You can get back on yours now if you want.
I think I'm done.
Okay.
I put my soapbox away.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Okay. Well,
Carry on.
Shall do. Here we go. The next bit that we have here, you have this really interesting EdSurge article kind of discussing crackdowns on social media for kids and like when they should happen and how. This article is by Carolyn Jones. It notes that according to the American Academy of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry, it states that 90% of those under the age of 18 are regular social media users. That's not surprising, but also just, wow, holy cow. Okay.
Yeah.
In the State of the Union this year, President Biden called on TikTok, Instagram, and other companies to do a better job protecting users under the age of 18. This article discusses the State of the Union and then also what happened a day later, which was that California's Attorney General said that he was joining a nationwide investigation into whether TikTok harms children's physical and mental health and whether it's violating consumer protection laws. TikTok is a really interesting one because it's partially owned by ByteDance, which is a Chinese company, and there's a lot of not so sure what's going on with the user data stuff happening there.
I just love TikTok so
yeah,
much,
I like
though.
TikTok too, don't get me wrong. Oh, I was just going to mention there's also a House committee hearing on boosting safety and transparency online, especially for kids. But I wanted to have a bit of counterpoint about this TikTok thing because just the other day, there was this huge Washington Post expose about how Facebook is paying a huge GOP consulting firm called Targeted Victory to launch a giant anti-TikTok media campaign. They're trying to basically drum up stories from communities across the country. They're looking for any kind of negative story about TikTok, and they're looking to viralize those stories and bring negative attention to TikTok because they're losing. I mean, frankly, I spend a fraction of the time on Facebook that I do on TikTok because TikTok is just a better,
TikTok is so much
happier
better.
place. Facebook makes me depressed to spend time on it, even a short amount of time. And I don't feel this way about every social media. Twitter is like a mixed bag. I really enjoy parts of Twitter because I've curated it so hard, but I haven't done that with Facebook.
See, that's why
And
I
I
love
can tell.
Instagram so much. 'Cause
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
a perfect curation for me.
Which is fine. Like, if you do a good job of being proactive about blocking
I go on like
problematic people and just trying to avoid, general depression triggering topics, you can navigate social media in a way that doesn't destroy your mental health, but it's hard. It's hard to do. Sorry, what were you going to say?
Oh, I was just going to say, I go on like a social media cleanse, like once a year, where I'll go through my accounts, see what I'm following, get rid of, you know what I mean? I do that, I'd say probably once a year.
You Marie Kondo your social media?
I do. And actually, I did it while we were taking the train from New York to Baltimore.
Oh, that's a good time.
That was like a good time to do it because what else am I going to do?
You're stuck there on a train
I
with
was
us.
stuck there for 3 hours. But it was nice because it also like readjusted my whole feed and it made it more centered. And because the one thing you have to realize is that your feed is going to keep changing because the purpose of social media, these companies, right, is to keep expanding what you see. So by
you don't get
doing
bored.
that, you're going to kind of bring it back to where you want it to be. So on Twitter, I am very particular about Twitter. My Twitter is a very specific place. And I only go there when I want to know like 3 things. I have 3 tabs on Twitter. One is the U.S. women's national team soccer. One is the Yankees. And one is Buckeye football. I really do. I'll show you. I have categorized my tweets and these accounts that I like. And because that's what I want to see. That's what I'm here for.
It's adorable.
I will say that makes me very happy about Twitter that I can segment it. Because then what I can do is when like politics are off the chain for whatever reason, I don't have to see any.
Right.
Because I just swipe to the group of tweets that I want to see and I just read about Yankees baseball.
Yep.
And I'm happy.
I think all of that.
So I like that.
Yeah.
That's a +1.
No, I think education about how to curate your own social media, I don't know that exists. Yeah, like, I don't know that people are talking about, I mean...
Oh, I have no idea what I'm doing.
Well, but I'm saying, and I'm saying maybe that's a skill that we should be teaching kids in schools if we're going to help them with digital literacy.
Yeah, I agree with that.
We should perhaps help them figure out how not to be made miserable by the social media they're consuming.
And the one thing that I notice, especially on Instagram, because that's usually my choice of social media, is I'll go through who I follow and I'll have like 3 accounts that I have no idea how I followed. And then I click on them and I realize that someone bought another account that I probably followed. And that makes me very mad because that gives me content I don't want. So going through it is just a good idea because a lot of times when these, and it's like usually like meme accounts because I think they're funny, but they'll get bought because they have, a million whatever followers. Right. And so it is good to just go do. Yeah. Also just, get rid of some of that negativity. That's what I do.
Yeah.
Anyways, I got my soapbox back.
But you're actually working against the way those platforms are designed to work though, because they're, especially Facebook, also Twitter.
I don't care about Facebook.
Well, yeah, I'm just saying, but they're rage machines. Like, that's the whole point of them, is that they're trying to just, especially Facebook is bad about this. They're trying to make people enraged because it gets more traffic. It gets more internet traffic when people are mad about whatever.
Yeah.
So the whole algorithm,
lives off of
it feeds
the
off
blood of your
yeah.
Truly.
It feeds off of human discontent.
It does.
And we're going to have to reckon with this at some point on a really large level. It might look like regulating Facebook or something, or breaking up the company or whatever, but like...
Can we just unplug it? Remember that time Facebook locked itself out
yeah,
of its own
that was
office?
actually one of the happiest days of all.
That was
When
a good
I thought
3
that
hours.
Facebook was just going to stop existing for a minute there. I was so happy.
I think my favorite tweet was like, it was like a mic tap. It was like, is this thing on? And it was just Facebook silence. Amazing.
I just think it's an incredibly irresponsible company. My dad sent me some article the other day. I think it was Ken Burns. I think it was Ken Burns.
Ken? What's he doing?
He said that Mark Zuckerberg should be in jail.
Oh, I love Ken Burns. I was afraid he was about to have a bad take. And I've watched hundreds of hours of his documentaries, and that's time I'm not going to get back. So thank God
he
Ken
recommended
Burns got it right.
prison sentence for Mark Zuckerberg specifically.
I have to see this.
Yeah, I'll go find
That's
the
his
article.
next documentary.
I'm pretty
it's
sure
like
that's...
96 hours of the Civil War, and then it's like 10 hours of Zuck, and then it just moves on. Okay.
Yeah. So anyway, I have a lot to say about that, clearly. But
Yeah.
back to this article, a lot of social media companies at least are giving lip service to this problem. They're taking steps to supposedly protect users, especially those under 18. Instagram, just for an example, in December, they announced they would stop allowing users to tag teenagers who don't follow them. And they added this take a break feature for teens.
TikTok has that.
Prompts you to... Yeah, TikTok... I
They're
get that.
ads
I get
by
that.
famous creators.
I get those ads because I watch too much TikTok, but it'll just show up in your feed and it's like somebody being like, hey, maybe now's the time to stop watching TikTok, which is fascinating when you think about it, because
they're
TikTok
paying
is saying
for
don't
content.
use this.
Exactly.
They're like,
It's
maybe
because
take
they
a
know
break.
we won't.
Yeah.
They're
That's the
hedging
other
their
thing.
bets.
That's why I'm saying they're doing lip service to this problem, because kind of everyone knows
What do you want it to do? Just go black?
Yeah.
Like,
well, yeah.
That just closes TikTok.
There's actually a whole category of productivity apps that locks you out of your own apps while you're trying to work on something so that you can.
I just had a conversation with a student about this, and he has set up his iPhone that he cannot spend more than an hour a day on social media. And so he made a joke one day because he was sitting there in class and he was mad because he was almost out because he came in late. And he'd been sick that morning. And I was like, well, what are you mad about? And he goes, well, my stomach was really upset this morning, so I already used my hour. And he was saying, because he'd been in the restroom for so long, he'd already used his hour of social media. And I said,
Poor guy.
I said, well, I think your filter is doing good work. I just think that maybe there are some workarounds.
We could make some exceptions.
Yeah, but it just made me laugh so hard because it was like a teenage boy being sad because his stomach was upset and he came to school late and he was at his hour.
My hour is up.
I was laughing so hard
Poor
at him.
guy.
Yeah, it was great. So anyways.
Yeah. So this article, they also interviewed a bunch of parents in it, parents and students, about social media and the impact of all of that on everybody's lives. Everyone agreed that if we don't use it correctly, it can negatively impact mental health.
Surprise.
Duh. We have a friend who quit Instagram for like months. He was just like, it's just bad and I don't want to use it and it's messing up my brain and making me...
Oh, yeah.
He said, this was actually very interesting. I hope I'm not going to say who it is, so I'm not giving away details, but he said that it was the way that it made him mad. It made him feel jealous, envious and jealous of
other lives
going better than he was perceiving his life to go, which is very insightful, honestly, because that definitely happens.
Yeah.
Everybody very carefully curates the
you share
images
the
they post
best.
on social media. You
Exactly.
only share the highlights, the really fine things that you want to brag about.
Yeah.
That can obviously lead to those sorts of feelings.
Yeah.
So I was
It's very true.
I was glad to hear him talk about that in a way that was so self-aware, but it really can be damaging. But the problem is, like we were just talking about, it is possible to use social media in good and interesting ways. Like, I learn a lot from Twitter. Tech Twitter is kind of just where I go to discover new technologies, because a lot of the programming people, techie Silicon Valley kind of people, and writers and journalists, those are the groups that Twitter is made for, basically. So it's easy to find a lot of interesting stuff in technology on Twitter. So that's kind of what I use it for. So it's possible that it can be a great thing, but parents especially will note that problems for them start when, like, for example, there was one parent who had her daughter's middle school gave each student a Chromebook, and there were no security measures on this Chromebook for some reason. Not sure how that would happen in this day and age, to be quite honest with you. But
I
they
have
just
some
were
questions.
like, here's a piece of tech.
I have some questions about this because it didn't say when this happened, but there is no school that is going to give a Chromebook to a student without having signed an agreement.
Yeah.
And so every school that I've ever been in that's had a one-to-one or any kind of loan, you know what I mean, option, they've never allowed social media.
Yeah.
Or the use of that.
Yeah. So basically the kid like downloaded social media apps on their Chromebook and we're just
right. And so I don't want to take the school's side on this because they definitely could have not signed an agreement. I just really can't imagine a school handing those out without having anything set up.
To hardly any school give out technology without security on it to prevent stuff like that happening now.
At a school that I worked at, if you took your device home and connected to that Wi-Fi, that was different. Now, you couldn't download the apps on the iPad, but you could access on a browser some more things. But I think the school, I'm just assuming, so take that for what you will. I think the school in this case would probably say, this student broke the agreement by doing this. Could it have happened that the school had no parameters? Sure. Does it seem likely? No. Because a school could be hung out to dry so quickly if, like, God forbid, there was, like, explicit material or things like that.
Pretty much anything.
That was kind of my issue with the article. And the mom didn't want to be named, and she didn't want to talk about how recent it was. And I was like, okay, so...
That seems a little sketchy.
I do think there's some value to it, especially if you think that your child is using a device owned by the school that has certain parameters, and the kid figures a way around it, which they're going to do. That's on your kid.
For sure.
That's not the school's fault.
I could imagine this having happened in the early days of a big push for one-to-one devices, so like a device for every kid in a district. I can imagine in the early days of that when it was very trendy to do, but there was very little organization around oversight that could have happened. Now there are whole companies whose entire existence is basically to put security suites on school-issued devices to prevent all kinds of abuses and to block content and monitor activity and all kinds of stuff. But that did not exist in the earliest days when there was a whole bunch of, like, you know, race to the top money and stuff like that went into one-to-one.
I mean, I was in a
programs.
school in 2012 that was one-to-one, and they had all of those features.
Wow.
And they were iPads. So I'm having a hard time with this.
Interesting.
Other than a student obviously breaking the rules of the agreement.
Sure.
Which are definitely that you can't have XX what material. You know what I mean? Like, but I see my kids every day on their Chromebooks, and I have software on my computer that lets me see their screens. And I know that they find ways to get around things.
Yeah.
And so that, again, falls back on them.
Yeah.
Because they're breaking the agreement.
Yep. Okay.
Okay, so the next piece we'll talk about. Yalda Ools?
Maybe. Looks like it.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Yalda Ools.
Big fan of your article. They are the founder of the Center for Scholars and Storytellers at UCLA and an expert on social media and children. And they stated that there's, of course, a long history of adults attempting to regulate media favored by young people, which is what you were talking about.
Yes.
So essentially what this article was saying was that before TikTok and Instagram, adults were mad at video games. And before the video game thing, it was just computers. And before computers, it was TV.
Before that, it was a radio. Before that, it was the gramophone.
Before that, it was the yard and
the
hoop and stick and the sun. And yeah. So here's a quote from the article. It says, these efforts don't really focus on the underlying issues. Instead, they're going after the medium. Media is always an easy target. It says, instead, we should be examining the bigger issues that are affecting young people. Inequality, poverty, climate, education. We need to be looking at the systems that young people are growing up in. Social media is only one part of it.
Yep.
And another quote that I loved was that kids aren't addicted to their phones, they're addicted to their friends. Yes. And the phone is just a means to an end. Yes. And I could not agree with this more. I think that you and I grew up in the time when violent movies and games and video games and things like that were going to make us all killers and like rap music. You know what I mean?
The
like,
boogeyman
I'm thinking
of the time.
The music that we listened to was like indicative of the crimes we were going to commit.
It's almost like Satanic Panic. It has that feeling. Like there's a new scary thing every however many years. There's a new thing that the media gets all worked up about.
Yeah. So I feel about this the way that I feel, obviously, about abstinence-only sex education, which is that not teaching students how to use their phone is not going to do anything for them in the long run because it's going to happen. They're going to have a phone and they're going to have to learn how to use it.
They're going to make babies.
And they're going to have sex and get pregnant and die. to quote Mean Girls. But I just mean, I had this conversation with my students the other day. And I am someone, when I am actively lecturing, if I am up doing stuff, I'm not on my phone. If my students are working on something, whatever, I'm in charge of the yearbook. I have to be on my phone some. Like, that's where everything is. So I had this conversation with my students the other day because I am also someone who I work better if I have music. So I always have music playing.
Yeah.
So I have students who'll say, can I listen to music? And in my head, I'm like, well, I would want to listen to music. So yes, that's how I basically answer my students. Would I want to if I was them? Does it take away from the educational process? But I told them the other day, they were like, oh, you never yell at so-and-so for being on their phone. And I said, do you want to know why I've never yelled at so-and-so for being on their phone? They've never turned in something late. They have never missed an assignment. They have never raised their hand after I was done giving instructions and asked me exactly what I just said. Everything is turned on time and it is correct. That is not a student that I have a reason to speak to about their phone.
Yeah.
Others of you I will speak to about your phone because I know that you can't possibly do both.
Yeah.
You can't pick a song, which is what they all tell me they're doing when they're on their phones, and
Picking
also
a
listen to
song.
my directions.
I'm picking a song. It's fine.
And so when they come at me like that, I'm like, well, let me tell you why.
Yeah.
That kid has had good grades. They have done what's expected of them.
Yeah.
And I tell them, you have to learn how to have a phone. You
I
have
think-
to learn when it's appropriate.
Right.
You have to learn when it's inappropriate. And if you are going to choose to use it when I'm speaking to you, that's inappropriate, and I'll ask you to put it away.
I think that's a much healthier attitude to address phone use. And we even had a whole episode on this, actually. We talked about cell phones in school. So we've kind of covered this ground already, but I think it's a much healthier attitude to give kids tools to use the technology that they're going to be using anyway, rather than just have this weird zero tolerance. Put your phone away. You have to put it in this thing when you blah, blah. Like, I know that sometimes schools will just mandate that, and you're not going to have a choice as a classroom educator about how to deal with it.
Yeah.
But I think that you have a good approach there.
Well, and there are, of course, all kinds of studies done that are like, if a phone is on a child, they're already like whatever % less likely to, because they're more concerned about what's going on their phone. And they are. But before I had a phone, I was concerned about other things that like weren't in my pocket that were somehow still taking up my time.
Yep.
To make me not pay attention to school.
It's the medium again.
So,
It's
like,
going after the medium.
I mean, when I was younger, I remember I like lived for Wednesdays because that was basketball practice day. You know what I could do on a Wednesday? I was so excited all day Wednesday to go to basketball practice that it didn't matter what was happening during school because all I could think about was basketball practice. But I'm just saying, the point is, and I'm sure you were the exact same way, or if I had a game at home or a new toy at home, all I wanted to do was go home and do that thing, right?
Yeah.
I don't know. I just feel so archaic.
Yeah.
Because it's like I was way more consumed by things that weren't a cell phone, but it was just as distracting to me.
It's a scapegoat.
That's my whole story.
It's a scapegoat, and again, not addressing the underlying issues. It's addressing symptoms of the underlying issues.
Even sometimes it's a book. Yeah. There are times that I'm reading a book that I'm truly so excited for it that I cannot do anything except for be excited about when I get to keep reading.
Right.
So I don't really have any patience for this argument. I really don't. And we're always like receiving data on like what this does. And it's probably funded just like, you know, like when Stevia and all that stuff came out and it was like all the sugar companies were doing it's like that. Like I'm sure somewhere it's like some anti-phone place that's like, let's research what they did to the kids and fried their brains.
Yeah.
And meanwhile, their parents, like the students' parents come into me on a parent-teacher conference and tell me about how all their kid does is be on their phone. And I'm like, you raised them. What am I supposed to do? Why is it my...
That's a you problem.
Like, I didn't do this. This was not my willing choice.
I did not invent the cell phone.
And I'm fine with parents having problems with students. Like, I don't, my parents had plenty of problems, I'm sure, with me at times. But it's just this weird cycle of placing blame. And phones aren't going to go away. So we might as well learn what's appropriate. And teach them that instead of just expecting them to never have been taught what to do with them. Yeah. When they get a moment and they're like, I'm going to blow up TikTok, Anyways, I'm actually done with my soapboxes.
Oh, okay.
Do you want me to keep going on?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. So something that is recommended by Common Sense Media.
What's that? Common
Sense Media is an organization that reviews and provides ratings for media and technology with the goal of providing information on their suitability for children. So they suggest, Common Sense Media suggests that teachers and parents talk regularly to young people, especially about digital good citizenship, and that schools offer digital literacy classes.
Yeah.
So in a perfect world, young people would use social media to connect with friends, express themselves creatively, and learn technology skills, which, to be fair, they are doing. That's definitely a big part of what they do.
Mm-hmm.
But one thing that comes with this is that it is a sign of privilege. Not all students have someone at home to learn these things from, which is why so much of this does sometimes fall on schools to have to handle. I feel pretty strongly that schools should have to teach all of them everything.
All of the things that parents should be doing.
Yeah,
do that too, and also all the academic stuff.
I know plenty of situations where we are the most stable things for them.
Yeah.
And I'm happy to help those students. But it is a bit of a frustrating moment, I will say, because in my head and in my heart, I know that had someone cared sooner, we likely would not be in, you know what I mean, whatever that situation is.
Yep.
So the last thing I want to point out, the U.S. Surgeon General reaches, I don't know why I included all of that.
I was going to ask you.
I just copy and pasted.
Like every credential.
I know. Well, I was really impressed. An MD and MBA, a vice admiral, what?
So he's got his business master's, he's a medical doctor, he's a vice admiral.
He's a... Okay.
And he's the Surgeon
That's pretty...
General.
Okay, he's very qualified.
Vivek Murthy.
So the U.S. Surgeon General released a report in 2021, which basically reached a similar conclusion on the overall mental health of young people. And in it, he emphasized that technology companies should research the effect of their products on children and make that info public and design platforms that are safer for all users, regardless of age. And one of the quotes that I liked from it said that even if technology doesn't harm young people on average, certain kinds of online activities likely do harm some young people, such as passive scrolling, which I'm very guilty of, unfortunately. And so he went on to say that technology companies must step up and take responsibility for creating a safe digital environment for children and youth.
Yeah.
And I'm fine with that. That doesn't bother me. So where does that leave you? What are your thoughts on how this affects bullying?
It's mostly what I was talking about earlier, is that I think we're learning that the technology itself is often scapegoated.
Yeah.
And what's really going on in cases of bullying and cyberbullying, it's really not the device or the social media app or whatever it is. It's underlying problems that need to be addressed. And
Like, it's not
often
TikTok's fault.
Right. We often just slap a Band-Aid on problems by taking away a kid's phone or taking away their, or whatever, you know. But those kinds of punishments do not really address the main problem. And then again, like what you were saying, I strongly agree with you that we should not simply prohibit kids from using their phones. I think that's the dumbest thing, because there's a huge opportunity there to help them learn how to be responsible citizens online, digital citizens. And I think that one of the main reasons a lot of that doesn't happen is because we ourselves, the teachers and the parents and the, caretakers, we don't have the answers figured out.
No.
In terms of how to best manage our social media lives.
Yeah.
So I think it's very easy to point at episodes of cyberbullying, for example, and just be like, oh, well, we shouldn't let them have phones. And it's like, okay, that's not really, that's not going to do anything to fix any of the problems. We need to start thinking about digital literacy as a core academic discipline, at least for the basics. We need to give people the tools to be online in a responsible way. And that definitely won't happen so long as you simply prohibit the use of these kinds of devices. So that's kind of my main thing. And again, I'm a technologist, so I want people to learn about technology because I think it's cool and I think it has a lot of potential. I also know how dangerous it can be and how damaging it can be.
It can be.
So I, as a technologist, want people to know about all of these things. I want them to have tools in their tool belts to be able to approach problems, to be able to handle disciplinary issues with bullying, especially with social media, in a way that is way more informed than the way we're handling it now. Yeah. So those are my wrap-up thoughts, I guess.
I think I would just say that, as you and I know, bullying existed before social media.
Yeah.
It is going to keep existing outside of the realm of social media. So until we just make sure that kids are doing what they should be and have support for learning about what's expected, then, you know what I mean? Like, it's not going to go away. Bullying is going to exist, unfortunately, which leads to why I think mental health support and resources are so important for people.
Yeah. We should probably not be sharing one school psychologist among 5 different buildings in a district, for example.
We need more of those. And the one thing, and this is like what I was talking about with PBIS, is that a lot of people who are bullying someone are dealing with something. And so it might be something we know about or we don't know about.
Yeah.
Last year, we did a questionnaire for our students to see how many of them felt like there was a staff member in our school that they trusted. That could be a cafeteria worker, it could be their advisor, a custodian, an admin, a sub, a anyone in the school that they see. 86% of our students said that they felt there was someone there that they trusted. I think that's a good start.
Yeah.
It could be better. I mean, we definitely want it to be better than 86%, but I think it's proof that relationships do work. Now, some of those kids who probably said that they had somebody they trusted probably bullied another kid, so it's not going to get rid of all of it. And I think we need to let our students learn these hard lessons, unfortunately. Mm-hmm. But I think as soon as we accept that, it's not going to stop. Like, it's not going to. Humans are cruel and we can be nasty. And there's just no avoiding it. But I want to make it a safe place for everyone, So yeah, like one of my points was that we have to help students understand that they're going to be hurt. You don't want to accept bullying, right? Like, that's not what I'm saying at all. But I want us to make sure that we're supporting the mental health of our students well enough to say, people are going to hurt me. And what do I do about it to make sure that I'm okay? Mm-hmm. And I hope to always see schools and officials and administrators and teachers and everyone involved side with the person being bullied, regardless of the situation. So yeah, there's a lot of work to do. It's not going to stop, which is kind of like the most depressing part, I think, of this whole episode, is that we know that people are going to bully others. But I do think that focusing on healthy social media use is a good step in trying to cut back and prevent some of it. But I don't know whose job that is.
Yeah.
I think like what all these articles said, I think it's a combination. I think it has to come from home and they have to see it modeled in multiple places, and it has to be something that we address at school.
Yeah.
It was a fun
Thank you
one.
for your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I mean, this is something I deal with every moment of every day. So.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I will say, I think most of our bullying, a lot of it is Snapchat.
Yeah.
Instagram is common, though, as well.
Yeah.
It's mostly those two things. It's just like private messages or private stories or things like that. That's normally where it gets
dicey.
Yeah, not so much Twitter and Facebook. I'm sure there are some, but it's normally...
Facebook is toxic in an older generation kind of way.
Yeah.
I think these other things you're talking about are toxic in the younger generations kind of way.
But TikTok hasn't really come up as much of a problem other than just my kids wanting to watch it.
Yeah.
But it hasn't, I shouldn't say it's never, but I haven't known it to be a part of a bullying.
Yeah.
I'm sure it could be.
It's not really designed
unless you made a video
way.
Making fun of somebody. Yeah. But I have not personally heard of that at my school. I'm sure it's happened, but all right.
Okay. Wrapping up. All right. Do you want to take us to our fill in the blank question? Would you like to do last episodes?
Yep, the last episode, we talked about high school sports.
We did.
Athletics.
Yeah.
Okay, so here's the question. LeBron James graduated from what famous private Akron, Ohio high school in 2003? And that was St. Vincent St. Mary High School.
Okay.
They're like the Irish, I think is their thing. But as we were doing that question, we kind of got into a bit of a word issue because we were talking about his high school, and he actually has his own school, the I Promise School.
Yes,
and it's also in Akron, so we had to reword a little bit to make it.
He attended
and graduated. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, but he does have a school in Ohio. It's called the I Promise School.
Cool.
So, anyways, your turn.
Okay. Yeah, this episode's question. In March of 2011, the president and first lady held a White House conference on bullying prevention. The White House also highlighted private, nonprofit, and federal commitments to bullying prevention, including a partnership with MTV Networks. MTV launched a multi-year award-winning campaign wherein the network partnered with the National Council of La Raza, the Anti-Defamation League, the Council on American and Islamic Relations, and GLAAD. The campaign work included cyberbullying and digital discrimination public service announcements, messaging encouraging bullying bystanders to support their friends, and tools to help connect victims of digital abuse to resources. What was this campaign called?
Vaguely remembering this.
Yeah.
Vaguely.
This might be a bit of an obscure tidbit, but I was
That's
researching and I found it and I thought it was
good
kind of
catch.
Cool. Yeah.
So what'd you learn? What's going on that's in your brain that's new?
Okay. Well, the first thing I learned, what I really learned was how to use this. I feel like this is probably every third episode or so I talk about a new technology thing that I learned. But I migrated my blog.
You've kind of given yourself away.
Yeah.
Your shtick.
Our website got hacked again, the 16:1 website, and it was hosted on the same.
Since the last episode?
No, since the last time I talked about hacking.
Oh, sorry.
Because our website also got hacked in like January, I
gosh.
think.
This
So
is
our
too
website got hacked again, and I fixed it again. So don't worry, you're not going to get phished or anything if you go there now. But I was really
no.
tired. Yeah.
Don't fish me.
I was really tired of our hosting provider because they were just apparently really terrible with security. And also, there's just a lot of weird stuff going on in the world right now with internet security, with conflict in the Ukraine and stuff. So anyway, that's all happening. But yeah.
No, I'm learning.
So internet security people are on high alert right now. But anyway,
Really?
yeah, a lot of hacking going on.
Okay.
Yeah. So anyway, someone tried to install fake Wells Fargo looking software on our hosting provider again.
Fargo.
And I was just really tired of dealing with the very bad very bad security. So I was like, okay, we need to find a new web host. And I also moved our
you're
domain.
tired of Wells Fargo
I'm tired of
trying to-
dealing with the Wells Fargo fakes. So I moved it to a new hosting provider, our website, and I also moved my personal website, which was on the same hosting account, to a new hosting provider. And I learned how to use I also updated the blog, the way the blog works. It used to run on Jekyll, which was built with Ruby, and now it runs on a JavaScript static site generator called Eleventy. And it's
11D.
It's really cool. It's an open source maintained by this one guy, open source supported by Netlify, which is the company that I'm now using to host my website, basically. It's a static site, so they do it over CDNs and stuff, but I'm using the company that is supporting his open source work. So it's really kind of a cool partnership, and I learned how to use it, and that's...
Cool.
Yeah. So that's
Nice
one
job.
thing. The other thing
That's
is...
a lot of tech.
That was
in
a lot
those
of tech.
words.
I know, I'm sorry. I'll try to cut out some of the tech words.
No, don't
It's a lot
cut
of
out any
techie babble.
We have people who know those words.
Well, it's true.
just not me.
It's true.
But I'm happy
It's
for
just
you.
not me.
And you sound so smart.
Oh,
And can I tell you that all I was thinking about that whole time was a song from The Sound of Music.
which one?
Well, the Wells Fargo wagon is a coming.
Oh,
That's how they get their instruments, remember?
you're right.
Yeah.
That's funny.
That's who got you.
That's
Can
who
you
got me.
believe a actual horse-drawn
Wells Fargo
carriage
wagon.
broken? Okay, so what else did
Yeah.
my trombone
My trombone.
and my website? All right, what else did you learn?
My domain registrar. and my tuba.
Not my Netlify.
Okay. The other thing I learned, which it was just this charming thing that I'd never heard of before, but there was a subreddit called Place Our
I need
Place.
to get into this.
You need to
one.
do some research on this. So I browse Reddit a lot, as one does, and I
That's
popped
a social
in.
media.
Yeah.
We didn't even talk about that one.
No, but
That's
I
not
don't
one
think
my
that's a very
students
that's
use,
not a
yeah.
very popular thing among the youth.
The
right now.
youth are on the Reddit.
So our place, basically, it's this social experiment founded several years ago, can't remember exactly when, by Josh Wardle, who has been famous recently
I'm mad
for
at him.
also inventing Wordle.
I'm super mad at
So
him.
the guy who made Wordle started our place, this place subreddit, and it's a social experiment that basically uses pixel art to make the internet make fun things and have interesting conversations. So it was just it was resurrected this year. So for 4 days, everybody on Reddit could go in, and it's this giant pixel map. It's like thousands of pixels, but you can go in, I think it was like once every 5 minutes or something, you could color a pixel. And so there were people, and streamers were really involved in this too. Streaming communities were playing a big part in manipulating how this thing looked, but it was just the internet mobilizing and organizing themselves to draw little pictures on this giant grid. But anyone from
do
anywhere
it.
could go in and overwrite whatever was being put on it.
Oh.
Yeah. So it was
I
changing.
thought
It was
once it made one color, it was done.
no. This thing was constantly changing in real time, and there were people battling back and forth to color certain
get their
pixels, certain
yeah.
things. Then, at the very end of it, and I happen to be watching it exactly at this moment, they basically turned off the experiment by making it so that the only color that you could put down was white. So then the whole thing, it looked
Went
like a
white.
blizzard meteor hit it. It started all going white.
I gotta see this.
Yeah, it was really interesting because I was just like browsing Reddit, and I happened to be staring at it at exactly the moment when they
It
turned
went
on the
white.
white.
You were probably very confused.
I was just like, what?
Where'd
What's
it go?
happening? Oh, the art's gone. But it's just, it's like one of those there's
Like the
this-
little Sam Gardens? For
well,
your Zen?
remember in House of Cards, that thing that they're doing outside that Francis keeps walking by and not paying attention to,
Yes.
and by the time he wants to go look at it, they've destroyed it. It's basically the same principle here, is
Gotcha.
that you fight over it for 4 days, and at the end of it, it all goes away because everything
Nothing is
flows.
real.
Nothing is real.
Everything
Points are
floats
made
down
up.
here.
So anyway, that was the other thing I learned about. It was very cool.
That's cool.
Yep. What did you learn?
I know we've talked about this show, The Gilded Age on HBO Max.
We keep talking about it. We've talked about it the last 3
I'm
episodes,
sorry.
I think.
Well, we should
No,
be
it's
done
great.
now for a while. 'cause
Yeah,
it's
there are no
over.
more episodes
But-
for this season.
So, like we've said before, we're big fans of Gilded Age and Downton and Julian Fellows. And they have a companion podcast. And so it has as many episodes of the podcast as there were episodes of the show. In each episode of the pod, they talk about what happened in the episode, just kind of recapping, talking about what they think might happen, like anticipating what's to come. And then they interview a couple people. So usually an actor or actress, and then also someone who was part of the creation. And so one of their episodes was with a historian. I didn't know that you could have a job in history and just be like an advisor to shows, like to make sure that this is accurate or how, and it was
Historical
just
fiction.
Yeah. And it was really cool because they were talking about how, like there are writers and there are all of these things that make shows go. But when you're doing something like that or like Downton or whatever, it has to be accurate for us to believe it. And so it was just really cool to hear a historian who's like trained as a historian. I think she has her PhD.
Yeah.
And so what she does is she goes to shows and reads the scripts and talks about, it was just really cool.
I mean, these people will do things like on exterior shots. They'll be like, well, there wouldn't have been that color gravel because at this time they weren't importing gravel from anywhere other than this
one place.
radius of whatever.
Well-
or they'll be like, you can't have a dress that color because that dye wasn't invented for another 100 years. Stuff like that.
What this professor, this historian really focused on was like the role of race in communities at this time.
Very
And so
interesting.
that's something that the Gilded Age deals with pretty heavily.
Yes.
And like talking about what parts of New York would black families have lived. And that's not the same as where the Astors or it was just really interesting. And it was like a mashup of all of my favorite things. So it was just a very enjoyable podcast. And I wish I would have known that I could have done that.
Maybe that's your next job.
Because I would still love to be like a historical advisor. I just think that'd be so neat. So it's just cool. Just a cool thing. Yeah.
Very neat.
And I'm officially done talking about the Gilded Age, I promise.
For now.
I will find a new show
see you next season.
in 2 weeks to talk about.
Okay.
Maybe by then Bones will be over.
Yeah, we're almost done with Bones, and we only have 6 more days to watch it or something before it leaves Amazon Prime.
True. We're on a bit of a crunch.
We're crunching.
Anything else?
No, final thoughts. Just, write in, say hello.
Please.
Hello at 16to1.com. We would love to hear from you, as always. And thanks for joining us.
Yeah.
We'll see you in 2 weeks.
We'll see you soon.
Bye.
Goodbye.
Listeners, thanks for supporting 16 to 1.
We're trying to grow our audience, so please check us out at 16to1.com, all spelled out, and tell your friends about the show.
On our website, you can find links to follow us on social media, an archive of all our old episodes, and a contact form where you can get in touch.
Thanks again for listening, and we'll catch you next show. Is anything connecting between these two things?
The synapse
Is there
firing?
a string? What's in here? Okay.
How's your gray matter?
There's none. It's black. It's dried up. And
Black shriveled matter.
black shriveled matter.